Hello everyone, and welcome to the next video in this series of doing Eilu Metzios. We're going to continue with learning Gemarah line by line. Alright, so here we go. So this is you may notice, this is the first bit that we learned at the previous video. I hope you've done Chazar on it and learned it very well, and you know how to read this piece, this one, this line and a half of Gemarah. You know all the words, know how to read it appropriately, and what everything means in here. Very important. Okay, good. Now we're going to do the next step, which is starting from Hechi Dami here. So if we remember, let's just review this step. We have Matzah Perus Mifuzarin. If you find someone who finds spread out fruit, Matzah, he finds Perus Mifuzarin, spread out fruit. V'kama, and how much, and how many fruit does he have to find, and how much of a distance does the fruit have to be spread out over? So Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kav, one amount of a kav, be'arba amos, in 4 amos as an area. Okay, and that was the answer to kama of matzah peris mifuzarin. Okay, and that was that step. Okay, so now we're going to see what the Gemarah is going to do next. So the Gemarah starts off with this very important key phrase, Hechi Dami. Hechi Dami. Let's circle that. Hechi Dami. Hechi Dami means, give you the literal translation, and then we'll explain what the real significant meaning of the the phrase is. So Hechi is how, right? And Dami is similar. Similar. Okay, you can't see that really well. Let's do a better color. Similar. Okay, so how is it similar? Remember, are all these words in Hebrew and Aramaic, they're sort of implied and never stated explicitly. Okay, so Hechi Dami, how is it similar? And this is a question. The Gemarah here, with the expression Hechi Dami, means, what it really means is, what is the case? And the Gemarah uses this when it wants to understand what is going on. And we set a case here, Matzah Perus Mifuzarin, right? We said this is our case. And the Gemarah is asking, Hechi Dami, what's the case? So you might ask, well, what does it matter? We know the case is fruit spread out in public property, and you get to keep it because it's spread out. If it's spread out in this quantity, a kav ba'arba amos. So what is the question? So the Gemarah is going to explain, because it doesn't seem so simple what the question is. This entire step is just the question. And it's not an attack, it's trying to understand the case. So Hechi Dami, how is it similar? Okay, so let's continue. Let's do a couple more words here. We have means if. Right? Means if. Derech. Derech means a way or a path. Path. Nefila. Nefila means falling. Falling. Afilu means even. Tuva means a lot. Nami means also. Then we have Vav means and. You may remember that from the previous video. Where did we have it? Vekama here. Vav is and. E, we said before, E is if. E is if. Derech, again, same word. Derech, away. Okay. And then we have hinuach. And hinuach means placing. Placing or placement. Could be either one of those. Okay. Placing or placement. Afilu, we had over here. Afilu means even. Betzir is less than. Mehachi, mem is from, and hachi has four meanings. So let's take it out here. Let's try and figure out which one fits the best. Hachi means so, such, thus, and this. Okay, so we're going to come to this in a moment. Just hang on a second. And nami we have means also. We had it before. Also. Okay, so we've translated all the words, but now we have to put it together and try and make sense out of this. So we already know, already that we're trying to determine. The Gemarah asks a question, what is this case of matzah peiros mefuzarin? Okay, so now either one of two things can happen. Either the Gemarah is going to elaborate on its question, or it's going to answer its question. So let's see which one it is. So we have E is if, derech nafila, a way of falling. So if a way of falling, afilu tuva nami, even a lot also. That doesn't sound like an answer. It sounds like an explanation. It actually sounds like an option of the case. Right? It says E, if you say, if this case where you found fruit spread out, derech nafila, it was through a way of falling. The fruit fell out of the person's hands, or out of their basket. Then that's how you found them on the street, all strewn all over the place. Afilu tuva nami, even a lot also. It shouldn't be restricted to these measurements that Rabbi Yitzchak said. So what does that mean? Well, let's see. Let's say this is the amount of arba amos. Okay? And for argument's sake, let's just say we have 5 apples is equal to a kav. Okay? 5 apples is a kav. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, if you find this configuration, you can keep it, and that's considered spread out. Because you're trying to determine what happened. If this person put them down nicely, then you can't keep them, obviously, because it obviously belongs to somebody. They were apparently forgotten, and therefore the owner has given up hope. Because there's no siman, there's no sign on them, the owner has given up hope, and therefore you're allowed to keep them. Okay, so what is the case where the owner would have lost them and you would get to keep them because there's no sign? Well, if they fell, the guy is walking with his fruit in a basket, and the basket, some fruit spills out of the basket, he's going to give up hope because there's no sign of him finding the fruit. So why does Rabbi Yitzchak restrict it to this amount in this space? Kav ba'arba amos. if they fell, why can't you say that it's 2 kav spread out? The apples are spread out, you know, the kav is spread out over a larger area. And this is somewhat rhetorical, because the Gemarah is explaining why Hechi Dami. What is this case? The Gemarah is trying to understand what this case is, because the two only apparent options of the case don't make sense, and the Gemarah is going through each one. So, if they fell, so why would it be restricted to Arba Amos? They could fall in, you know, that could have been running, and they would have spread out very far distance. So, I derech nafila, if it was through a way of falling, afilu tuva nami, even tuva, a lot, nami also, a lot of distance also. And I, if, you see this parallelism, I and I, v'i, and if, derech hinuach, through the way of placement, he put them down there, so afilu betzir mehachi, even less than that, even less mehachi, from this fits the best, mehachi, from this, afilu, even, betzir, less than, mem, from, or than, hachi, this, nami, also. What does that mean? Well, let's say we have our Arba Amos. So if you put them down, why does it have to be Arba Amos? Why can't it be in 1 Amos squared? He put his apples in here. If you put them down neatly, they could be together. And then he forgot about them, and that's why you get to keep them, because he's not going to be able to retrieve them. But why is it this amount? Why this amount and not either this or this? So the fact that Rabbi Yitzchak said Kav Ba'arba Amos shows it can't be either one of these cases. So if it's not either one of these cases, which are the only two obvious cases that it could possibly be, then what is it? And that's the Gemarah's question. Hechi Dami, what is the case? What's going on in this case? Because if you say that it was Derech Nefila, so what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying doesn't make any sense. And if you say Ve'i derech hinuach, and if you say it's derech hinuach of placement, it also doesn't make sense what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying. So what is the case that Rabbi Yitzchak answers the answer that he gives of Kav Ba'arba Amos? Okay, that's this step of the Gemarah. Some things of interest to note about this are as follows. First of all, we have Hechi Dami, which tipped us off to what this step is attempting to do. And this entire thing is the step, and it would end off with a question trying to understand what the case is. And the next step presumably would answer it. We'll take a look at that in the next video. But so Hechi Dami is the first thing to notice. This is a key word that sort of gave it away to us. Then you might notice there's a parallelism. We have derech, and Ve'i derech, and then nami and nami at the end. And when you see phrases that have, and you have a filu in the middle, and the only difference is tuva and betzir mehachi, that's one difference, and hinuach and nefila are a difference. But otherwise the entire step, the entire phrase or statement is a parallel. The Gemarah does that very often when there's two things. Is it this or is it that? Which one is it? And it has the same phraseology for both, and it only changes up what are the actual things that are unique about each case. In this case, falling, and this one, placement, and this one should be a lot or a little or less than. Okay, and that's how you'd see that this is one step, right? And we take that a step further, and just to explain, okay, so let's say you looked at the Gemarah, and the Gemarah would look something like this, right? You'd have no indication of anything here. So how would you know the steps are broken up? And let's just say that you didn't have a break here, okay? How would you know how the steps is broken up? So one thing you could do is, let me get a new layer here. Get a new layer. Okay, let's see. Good. Okay, so let us say, for example, we have Gemarah here. That's a key indicator. We know that this is the beginning of a Gemarah statement, and this word is not going to be part of our translation, so we can ignore that word. And we have Matzah Peres Mefuzarin, right? We translated this. This we realized was a quote from the Mishnah, and then we had Vikama, and is a question. And the reason we stopped here is because we're introducing someone who is saying something, and there's no vav or dalid or anything that's connecting him to this previous thing. It didn't say Di Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, right? Dalid, you may remember, is that as a prefix, right? It's a prefix. Or it didn't say vi as a prefix, which we know means and. It didn't say any of that. It just jumped. So we know there's sort of a division here. There's a division here in the steps. And we can draw our line as a break. So we know there's some division here, because it doesn't continue or lead in, and then because we know there's a division, because of this break, so we could say, okay, then this whole thing, because of Vikama, there's a question. And then we could try and figure out what the question is, but just to see, this could give us some indication of how to break it up. So then we have Rabbi Yitzchak, and now we know Rabbi Yitzchak is saying something, and he's going, and he's going, and he's going. And then we see this phrase here. We see Hechi Dami. So let's underline that. We see Hechi Dami. We know Hechi Dami now. We know it is a key word. So you know there's something of a divide here, because we know Hechi Dami is going. We said something, and the Gemara is trying to determine what it is. So we can say, okay, let's put a break here. Let's put a break here, and this is what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, and now the Gemara is going to say Hechi Dami. And then, from the Hechi Dami, we have two choices. The Gemara is either going to answer the Hechi Dami, in which case, if the Gemara is going to just go ahead and answer it, we have to figure out what the Hechi Dami is asking. Here, the Gemara, and the other option is, if the Gemara doesn't answer it immediately, that means the Gemara is going to be explaining the different choices that the case could be, and the problems with each. So here, and we see E, if, and we see vi, and if, and the Gemara could chain a whole bunch of these together. It could be E, vi, and it says the case. Okay, first case, derech nefila. First case is derech nefila, and then second case is derech hinuach, and the Gemara rejects them for these two reasons respectively. Okay, and now we'll discuss here in the next video why we break here. We have to see what the next piece of Gemarah is going to start with, but we'll get to that in the next video. Don't want to get too confused. Okay, so that's the video. Let me put back the what we did, and I encourage you to do Chazara, review this, make sure you can read it inside without looking at the words. I would highly recommend not writing the words directly in the Gemarah. Either write them make a little number here or something, and put the translation on the side, or put it in a separate notebook. But don't put it directly in the Gemarah, because the goal is to learn these words in the context, because you're already seeing that from this first line there are a couple things that come up in the second line, right? The vav. If you learned the vav in the first line, you know it in the second line, and now you're going to know vi, and you're going to know, and we saw within this one step of the Gemarah, we saw so many words repeated. Okay, so by learning these words, we're adding them to our vocabulary, and they'll help us later on when we see them come up in other places. So very important to learn the words and know how to read it inside without having the words right there in front of you. Okay, so this is the step. I encourage you to review it, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll continue this piece of Gemarah. Have a wonderful day, and keep steiging.